Welcome back to day 100 of our chess journey to 1500 ELO on chess.com. So today I kind of contemplated as to what to do for this special occasion of 100 days. I settled on wearing a suit. Because which better way of celebrating than wearing some festive clothing? Anyways, guys, I'm ready to just get rolling today and crush our opponent. At least we can hope for it. We get Muhammad Idanyal from Iran. 1d4. What does our opponent do? Just let me move the microphone a bit further back, because I moved it further up so you guys could hear me when I stood up. This, once again, we know the drill here. This is an inaccuracy because here, and we get the center here, and yeah, we get the center here. We have analyzed this a few times. Do not defend the d5 pawn in the queen's gambit with a piece. Has to be defended with a pawn, or it's an inaccuracy. I think we have this move here, which might be good. I think we've been looking at this before, but I think knight to c3 does the deal as well. Just defending this pawn. Now this might be a move in some lines, and we could just look to get some quick development going. If this is played, I think we have this. Just bullying the knight as much as possible. I seem to remember here last time we played this, the computer gave us some bizarre advantage by just pushing our pawns in some interesting fashion and grabbing the entire center, and even more so than that. So here I think I would suspect we have an advantage of about 0.5, if I remember correctly from our analysis from previous similar positions. If this is played, it might be slightly annoying, but we might have to play this and blocking in this bishop, which wouldn't love to do. We might also just play queen to c2 and then play like this afterwards here, which probably works as well. I think f3 is a quite typical move to support the e4 push if we are allowed to do so. So our opponent here is thinking, might this be the rare occasion here where we get a time advantage? Typically speaking, we're down by, well, a lot of time. So definitely don't mind not being downtime here. Now what I was looking at here, which kind of distracted me, is I was looking at just any random move here and this. And do we win the bishop here? I don't think we do, was my conclusion, because something like this, or the queen could come out, so that doesn't win a piece. But still, I think this seems good. I'm expecting to see bishop to b4. a3 was a move I was looking at as well, but I don't think it's necessary. Well, this might be annoying in some lines. Let me just calculate quickly here. If this is played, we can't go here because this is a check, so that doesn't do a whole lot. So what I'm looking at here is this, forcing this, then this move, but then our opponent can take. But is this capture bad for us? Honestly, I don't think so. But if we get this, this, and this, is this good? Well, then there is this move. Basically here I think we always have, wait a second here, we might have a better idea. Does this not win material? First of all, we could calculate this, but that's not important. The important thing here is this, I guess. And here this might be played. Honestly, I can't quite tell if this is good or not, because for some reason it doesn't quite seem to win material after h6, at least not as far as I can tell. Let me just have another quick look here. Can we start out with this move? Does it change anything? Just leaves this pawn hanging, which is not quite ideal. But this has to win material for us to play it, because otherwise this pawn gets left hanging and we might be slightly overextended. So this, 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 and I guess we just trade some pawns in that case, but then we're left with an isolated pawn, so that's not that good. So we have this, we could take, but does it benefit us? Don't think so. We could have this as well, but although it defends the knight, we don't quite need to. This might be good as well, supporting our center. Which leads me to conclude here, a3, developing here or developing this bishop. Not necessarily here. Might be good. This might be okay as well, because now this pawn is hanging. I'm remembering here. Or it's not quite hanging because of this, but let's say we play here, takes, here. If we are forced back here, this pawn does end up being lost, which is not ideal. I'm realizing I'm getting lost in my train of thought here, calculating a bit too much. Why not just go for this move here? Defending the pawn and strengthening our center. This does disallow this knight move here, but well, this pawn had to be defended. Could have played bishop to d3 as well, might have been solid, but the differences might not have been that great. Castles might still be an option, although if castles is played, I think opening up the king here becomes worse for our opponent. So the knight develops, now this pawn is hit. Just looking quickly here at some alternatives. We don't have a lot that works, at least not easily. And this seems good, pinning this knight as well. And this would be good, I think. because we don't want to lose this pawn here. We can't easily push it. This might be an option, but then this bishop becomes difficult to develop. This is an option, but this is playable and the queen gets quite active. So let's come out like this instead and hit the knight with a pin. Now what I'm looking at here is if we see this, this and this, b3, and the file can't be utilized to pressure the pawns. So our opponent castles, kind of calling our bluff here and saying take us, or take me, or take my knight, or whatever our opponent would say. I think I'd like to take them up in the to capturing here, because now it seems more forced. And now what is our best option? This pawn is kind of paralyzed now. Can't come forwards because of, well, this. This is good. Could move the queen as well, but I don't think we need to. Getting castled here might just take priority. So let's do just that. Is there an argument for queenside castling though? I think it exposes us a bit too much as this file is open. This seems better to me. Defending the knight here and trying to play solidly. Because, well, if we are too greedy here, we're quite likely to lose if we can't castle. This seems annoying, but at the same time, I think it loses the bishop here to this. Our opponent can't defend both of the bishops. So here, if we play this, this is likely to be played. And then I guess the bishop goes here and on an outpost and defends the pawn as well. I think that's an okay transformation of the position for us. So I'd like to go for it. I was looking at capturing the knight we have pinned as well. However, I did not quite feel convinced there. Importantly here, this pawn is defended by the knight, so if this is played, I guess we have to take like this. Which I think would be good, because this pawn needs protection. Because it's an easy target here, as it's not defended by a pawn and it can't advance. Now this bishop here, I think, is a powerful piece. If we get onto this diagonal, this pawn might get difficult to defend in the long term. And it can't easily move, because this pawn has to move first, which, well, it can't quite do so, at least not easily. As I mentioned, I'm expecting this to be played. We could take with the knight, but I don't quite like this as much, because this here defends our pawn and kind of removes a weakness. And as long as this pawn stays here, no rook can come down here along the b file and hit the pawn. So the bishop here is luckily going to be kind of dealt with to some degree. If this sorry, if bishop takes knight here, I think we're quite happy. This isn't bad, I think. The king feels quite safe on e2. Worst case scenario, we move a bit over and should be in a good spot. At least as long as this is not playable, sacrificing the knight to get the bishop. I predicted this move here, curious whether we'll see it or not. It's probably quite decent, but it's not played. The bishop takes here is our opponent's preferred move. Let's just come up. I don't think this is bad, as I don't see how our king gets targeted. We have pressure, potentially this way as well. Our rooks are connected now, so we could play on this file. I don't think I'd like to take here. This doesn't help us, but this kind of does. And this kills off this move, which is a win-win for us. Now, we could argue there might be some idea of calculating this, but we don't get any more, so, or rather it would just win one pawn for the piece, which would be a bad trade for us. So let's drop back to this more favorable diagonal, or so I'd like to say, but might have maybe had to keep the pin there. I kind of forgot about the pin. Or, well, in the heat of the moment, I evaluated this as being better, I guess, or forgot the value of the pin. Now this allowed the queen here to defend the pawn, which it would have otherwise been unable to do, I guess, because this might have been forced. But I don't think that's too bad for our opponent. Do we have this? Honestly, I think I'd prefer playing with our rooks first. I was looking at this move and trying to come up with a response. Don't quite want to go here in that case. With this, and we quickly run out of squares. So there might be some merit here in playing h3, simply because of this move being an option. But is this trade bad for us? Honestly, I think it is, because our bishop is incredibly valuable here, whereas our opponent's knight is kind of dead meat. Do we have time for this? Kind of difficult to say. I was looking at moves like this as well, but this defends everything. It doesn't quite convince me. So instead, this perhaps, if this is played. Now, once again, I don't think I'd like to give up this powerful diagonal. There might be arguments against playing this, but in this position, two rooks, a queen, and a bishop, and even our king on e2, I decided to play h3. Simply because, as I mentioned, this pawn becomes incredibly difficult to defend. And as our opponent here wants to play passively or keep their major pieces defending this pawn, well, a rook could place itself on b7. But still, that's defensive play, giving us the option of going on the offensive. This rook slides over. I don't see an argument against sliding on over ourselves too. It's just a matter of which rook we choose. And there might be some argument for this here, but this a pawn is defended by the queen, so I don't think this can easily fall, leading me to choose this a rook here to get to b1. Now, if a rook for our opponent here gets down here without us having a rook, then that's bad for us, because then all our stuff falls along the first rank. But this, I think, is really good for us. Our opponent just gave us the b file. Now we have ideas like this and this. I think this was a mistake. This, and we win the pawn. At least that's what I'm looking at. Let's try to calculate a bit further here, because this is an important decision. Here, and we could maybe even force this. The pawn here is weak. I think this looks really good. If this pawn ever takes, we take here. We get this, but here we just take. And we're up a pawn. We have the king activity from earlier on. We have the file, although, well, this file could be grabbed as well. Then I don't think we want to move the bishop there. Oh, okay, so this has to be calculated. If this is played, and we have this, might not be ideal. I think we might want to keep the bishop here. We want to keep the bishop. Okay, so if we want to keep the bishop, maybe this. Centralizing the king here and disallowing a rook infiltration here. If the bishop is hit by the rook. This takes away this square from the knight as well. So let's say if this is played, there is no annoying maneuver getting into our position. Is a4 a move? Still, whenever we're hit here, it's kind of annoying because the rook gets down here and just kind of hits our position. So let's come up with the king here first and play like this. So well, we have a bishop for a knight and we're up one pawn on d4. Otherwise, the position is quite symmetrical. Apart from us having a slightly more active king and a rook in an open file as opposed to a rook behind this pawn here, which would have been a good rook if it wasn't for our pawn, preventing this pawn from just coming down the board. Now we can't go here because of the knight. So which alternatives do we have? I was looking at this. Because here our opponent can't quite dislodge our rook, and if this is played, well, I guess we just maybe slide on over and this pawn hangs, and I think we have the better activity. The knight would hang here as well, and the knight can't easily move either. Could go here, but wouldn't really hit anything. This seems active and it seems good. So let's come in this way. I would like to get our bishop here though, because it cuts off the king. But once we're given this, I think rook activity takes priority here. Is this a blunder or not? Let me calculate quickly. Here, the problem here is the rook gets quite active, which doesn't seem to be ideal. So maybe coming here instead is good. The knight doesn't have a whole lot of squares, and the king gets cut off. I think I prefer this. We might have this in some positions, although I would like to get our pawn on a dark square so we can defend it with the bishop if needs be. The knight goes here. This versus this. Let's have a quick look. What can our opponent play here? I'd like to go here because I realized we might want to force our opponent's pawn to stay on a dark square so we can target it. This. But here the pawn can come up. But the knight here can't, or it can go in like this perhaps if... No, but our bishop lives there, so it gets annoying for our opponent. I think this transformation seems to favor us, because we can grab this pawn here and maybe try to advance our own a-pawn. The knight comes up like this. Here we restrict the knight and the pawn. Seems good to me. The knight can't go here or here. This pawn has to move to survive, but then we just move to grab it, and it doesn't take too many moves to advance the pawn. This seems to be a bit too slow, and our bishop here defends those important squares. Didn't expect this move, but can't we just go here? And if takes, we take, and I don't see a continuation. Maybe here to be annoying. Maybe this. Or this might be crushing. Because if we get this, then the knight can't go here either. So it can't go here, 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 or here. And there is nothing to be done about that, to be honest. We'd have to go all the way back here, which is a horrible and long maneuver. In which case, we are able to come up here in the meantime, grab this pawn, and I think we're looking at a queen. Still, this is an idea, I guess, but Don't quite see it working out that well. And honestly, if we get our king here, we could move our bishop back, and this is no longer a square. Let's take this, and honestly, I don't think we take. Let's force our opponent to take here, and we will come up. Whichever way is our opponent captures, we just capture with this pawn here, and we advance our a pawn, and we should be in a great spot. This is likely to be played. I don't quite love it, but well, we can't prevent it. But we have this. Surely this is winning. This pawn is targeted. The knight doesn't get here in time. Does it? If this is played, no, there we just come up like this, and I think we should be good. Now the knight can't go here, so it can't prevent this maneuver. Oh, well, this is a move, I guess. Well, we could lose the pawn. Should still be a win. But it's a bit sloppy by me. I have to confess, or admit rather. Now I think the best way of winning is by killing counterplay. And then, or honestly, we might not have to move the pawns here first. We can just come over with the king, I think. This is what allows us to have winning chances, because despite our bishop being unable here to target those pawns, we can open up this pawn as a passed pawn by sacrificing, or trading this one rather. Now the king can come up. Our opponent here does not want to move backwards, but they have to. We get in like this. I guess we can slide on up with the bishop. And now one pawn is going to move, but now our opponent is in zugzwang. The king has to move away from the pawn, and we just promote. So this feels like a really nice game here. This is a creative defense here, but honestly, we don't need our bishop once we get to this position. Let's advance our pawns. Honestly, I think the easiest way is this, allowing this, and just coming up this way. Because this is an unpreventable promotion. Our opponent can't do anything about it. So we have our queen. We can ignore this, I think, and just set up our checkmate here. Let's mirror the king movements. It's been a while since I've been doing this kind of a checkmate pattern, but let's force the king back to this A file, and then go here, I guess. And then we move the king in, and that should be the end of it. It's important the king is 2 squares. We don't need all the king moves here. This should be sufficient, and this is checkmate. So it seems like we will be getting to 1471 after today's game, which is great, a new all-time high, and we will be about 4 games away from our goal for this journey at least. The king moves will checkmate, and there we go, a win for today as well. Well played to our opponent. They gave us a run for our money. Although I don't think we were ever in a losing position. We did still have to work for this win, which made it a great game. We played today with 89.5. Our opponent played with 80.5. We had a mistake here and 5 inaccuracies. Another game here with high game ratings, as is to be expected in most of our 1d4 kind of games. Let's have a look here. This was all normal. Apparently this was horrendously bad for our opponent here. What did I miss here? Or is there a lot to miss, to be honest? I guess it's just good. Sorry, the difference here is not massive between the moves. Apparently this was a move. Oh wow, this is creative. I wouldn't have spotted this. Here, if we take, the queen takes. Still, this was a decent position. This was inaccurate. What happens here? This is a move. We come back, and I guess this is good because we force this weakening move, T5, and then we play on. Let's jump on ahead into the review again. This was not the best move. Here we took, which wasn't blessed by the engine, but it was still deemed a good move. This was good, and this was, I think, quite critical. Although this was deemed bad. How come? Oh yeah, okay. Because of this. Or wait a second. Oh, wow. Well, that's brutal. I didn't see this. Luckily, our opponent didn't either. Sacking the queen to get a pawn, at least at the end of the line. In this position, should have apparently, was it take the knight first? No, we should have taken like this. Right? Seems like it. And then if this was played, just come back and argue our position is better. It's getting hot here in the suit. I'll have to take it off after the video. Still, it was kind of fun here doing something for the occasion. This was good. The H rook was actually best, I guess because there is no file to play on here, but honestly I thought there might be some developments making this more likely to be a good move than this. But honestly, with rooks it's always play one move and or play one rook, and it's always the other rook that's favored by the engine. This was great for us. Here we're in 2 moves, 0.5, 1.3 and 3.1. This was just great for us. Our opponent let us have a nice transformation of the position here. I guess they misevaluated something, and this was just crushing. It's funny to see her here when we're up just 1 point of material. The position says 4.4, but simply I don't see any play for our opponent. The knight doesn't have anything to do, and we have the king activity. You can play like this in this position perhaps, and it gets difficult to hold onto the pawn, so I can see why this was the case. And here even, this was the more concrete approach, forcing this, and yeah, this is... I'm glad to see, by the way, e5 was blessed by the engine. Here, I think this would have been good as well. Oh, no, of course not, never mind. We had to get the king to b5 first, and then go here, and then we could cut off this last knight, or last square for the knight. This was all good. And this was basically just a matter of converting. I'm glad to see here, by the way, the computer did bless the approach, saying this was the best way of doing it, most concrete way, but this was not best. Apparently this was a mistake or an inaccuracy. Oh yeah, because this was playable. Didn't consider this forcing the king away, giving us king to e7. Well, it's basically the same thing here. We have this, and we got our checkmate. Well, there we go, guys. That's our game for today. Thanks to our opponent, Muhammad Idanial from Iran. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. This has been our 100th video so far in this journey. We're up to 1471 ELO. See you guys tomorrow. Bye bye.